Just transfer it to our account. She won't need it soon anyway. I didn't drop the tray. That would have made a sound. But I did freeze in place, my fingers curling so tightly around the edge of the silver that the old burned scar on my palm started to sting again. I stood behind the kitchen door, unmoving, barely breathing. They were in the dining room. I'd just stepped out to get the coffee. Same as always, same as every Thursday evening when Sadie and Thomas came over for their weekly check-in. That's what they called it. A check-in. Like I was an appointment. A file to be reviewed. I'm telling you, Thomas went on, his voice low but clear. The woman's almost 75. She's not going to last much longer in that big house. It's ridiculous. She barely climbs the stairs now. Sadie said something I didn't catch. Maybe she murmured. Maybe she stayed silent. But she didn't protest. She didn't correct him. She already signed the transfer authorization for the trust, Thomas continued. We just need to move the remaining balance before she decides to get clever. A pause. Then that sound he makes when he smirks. That breath through his nose, that faint clicking of the tongue. She won't even notice. We'll tell her it's for a tax thing. Or better yet, funeral expenses. Let her think we're planning ahead. I backed up 2 careful steps until I reached the counter. The tray was still in my hands. 3 cups. Creamer. Sugar. The one with the tiny chip was mine, as always. When I walked into the dining room, neither of them looked up. Thomas was scrolling on his phone, and Sadie was rubbing her temple like she had a headache. I set the tray down between them with steady hands. Coffee's ready, I said. I didn't mention the door. I didn't mention what I'd heard. Not yet. Sadie glanced at me. Thanks, Mom. Thomas didn't say anything. They sipped in silence for a while. I sat across from them and folded my hands in my lap. My fingers still trembled slightly. I curled them tighter to hide it. How's the roof holding up? Sadie asked eventually, with the kind of tone people use when they're forced to make conversation with strangers at a bus stop. Fine, I said. Still keeps the rain out. You really ought to think about that stair lift we mentioned last time, Thomas added. I know you don't like the idea, but come on. You're not 20 anymore. Neither are you, I replied mildly. He chuckled. Touché. I watched them. Noticed how Thomas looked at the walls. Not like a guest, but like a buyer. His eyes flicked up to the old molding, down to the hardwood floors George and I had sanded with our own hands back in '86. He didn't see memories in this room. He saw equity. Sadie finished her coffee first. She always drank fast, as though being here made her nervous. Maybe it did. Maybe it should. I stood. You'll stay for dinner? Oh, she said, exchanging a glance with her husband. We actually have reservations tonight. That new place off Peachtree. Thomas's clients recommended it. Of course, I said. Don't let me keep you. They left without finishing the pie I'd baked. When the door shut behind them, I stood in the foyer for a moment, staring at the empty plates and the faint imprint Thomas's shoulder had left on the cushion. Then I walked to my study. The drawer on the left side of my desk holds everything that matters. My will, the property deed, the folder with my husband's last tax returns. And now, apparently, a signed authorization that I don't recall giving. It was there. Stapled neatly to a letterhead I recognized from Thomas's firm, dated 3 months ago. I sat down slowly and turned on the desk lamp. They thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I wouldn't understand what I was reading. They thought wrong. The papers told a story I hadn't been given. My assets, consolidated. My house, reassigned to a family-managed trust. a clause about anticipated end-of-life medical decisions that made my stomach twist. It was all legal, every signature in place, including mine. But I knew the trick. They'd buried it inside the estate update Sadie brought me that afternoon in June, the one she said was just standard and easier for taxes. I hadn't read it. I'd trusted them. And now they were just waiting for me to die. That night, I didn't sleep, not even with the pills. I sat in the kitchen with the lights off, the pie untouched on the counter, and the radio playing soft jazz, like it could drown out the echo of Thomas's voice. She won't need it soon anyway. The next morning, I put on my shoes and my wool coat. The sun hadn't risen yet, but I didn't care. I walked down to the end of the street, where the bus still stopped twice a day, even if no one ever used it, and I went to the bank. Not because I was afraid, because I was angry. The woman at the front desk had cheerful eyes and a name tag that read Natalie. She looked up from her screen and smiled, the way people smile at elderly ladies in tidy coats. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you today?" "I need to speak with someone about my accounts. In private?" "Of course." She typed something into her computer. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I imagine someone can find time. My name's Maven Griffin. I've banked here since 1978. That changed her posture. People who've been around since the Carter administration get a little more weight in places like this. "Let me see who's available." 10 minutes later, I was in a glass-walled office across from a young man with slicked hair and a wedding ring that still had the shine of newness. His name was Owen. He offered me water. I declined. "What can I assist you with today, Mrs. Griffin?" I laid the folder on his desk and opened it to the authorization document. "I want you to explain this." Owen adjusted his glasses. "Okay, let's see." His fingers moved lightly across the paper. Yes. This is a standard trust authorization. It allows your designated trustees to manage your estate in line with the guidance outlined here." "I see that," I said. "The question is, how did it get signed?" "Well," he hesitated, looked closer. "It appears to bear your signature." "Yes, and I remember the day. My daughter said it was just an estate update, something to make taxes easier. She handed me a stack of papers, highlighted a few lines, and said, 'Just here and here, Mom.' I trusted her." Owen straightened in his chair. "I'd like to know if the trust has been activated," I went on, my voice flat. "Have there been transfers?" He clicked into his system, frowning now. "There was a request submitted last week, a transfer of remaining account balances into a separate holding account managed by the trust. It hasn't been executed yet, still pending a compliance review." I nodded. "Cancel it." Mrs. Griffin, that's a significant instruction. I'll need to confirm I'm the grantor, the owner, the woman with the money. Cancel the damn thing." He flushed. "I'll speak with our trust department." "I'll wait." Owen left the room with his tablet in hand, and I sat back in the chair, staring at the rows of little succulents lined along his windowsill. Somebody had watered them that morning. Everything fresh, in place, growing. 15 minutes later, he came back. His tone was different now, less bright, more careful. "I've spoken to our legal and trust services division. Because the funds haven't been moved yet, and because you've now raised a dispute, we're placing an immediate freeze on the trust operations. No transfers will occur until further notice." "Good." He paused. "Do you wish to dissolve the trust entirely?" "Yes." "We'll need to start that process today. There's paperwork involved, and it may require independent legal counsel." "I have a lawyer. I'll bring her the documents." I looked him in the eye. But you freeze it. Today, no one touches a cent. Owen nodded. Do you have online access to your accounts? He asked. Yes, but I don't use it. May I suggest activating two-factor authentication? We can also add a verbal password for all phone-based instructions, just to be safe. Do it. He tapped away for another 5 minutes. When I left the office, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel anything at all, really. Just cold. Tired. Like someone had siphoned off part of my breath and wouldn't give it back. The bus ride home was slow. I stared out the window at rows of dogwoods shedding their leaves in lazy spirals. Savannah in fall always looks a little tired, like it's been holding its breath through another long summer and is only now allowed to exhale. The house greeted me with its usual quiet, the clock ticking in the hallway, the fridge humming low. I stood in the entryway for a moment, listening. The living room looked untouched since the night before. Thomas's glass still on the coaster, the folded napkin Sadie hadn't used. I left it all and went to the kitchen. The phone rang mid-afternoon. I didn't answer. Not the first time, not the second, not the third. Eventually, Sadie left a voicemail. Hey, Mom. Thomas said you might have gotten a little confused about something with the estate paperwork. Can we just talk about it? I don't want you stressing. Love you. No apology, no explanation. Just a tidy little narrative in which I was confused and she was concerned. I deleted the message. Then I made myself a cup of tea and opened the old drawer where I kept the letters George had written me over the years. I didn't read them. Not yet. Just wanted to know they were still there. By nightfall, I'd made up my mind. Tomorrow, I'd call my lawyer. I'd start the process of tearing this thing down. Every line, every loophole, every false signature. And if they wanted a fight, well, they were about to remember who raised them. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. Didn't need an alarm. When something shifts inside you, like it had inside me, sleep becomes a shallow thing. Too light to hold you. I laid there for a while, listening to the house breathe. This house had a sound of its own. The groan of the water heater, the pop of the old pine floorboards adjusting with the dawn chill, the faint whistle through the tiny gap in the kitchen windowsill. It was my house, and I was done pretending otherwise. By 7:30, I'd showered, dressed, and made coffee. 1 cup, just for me. Not in the chipped cup this time. In the good porcelain, the one I usually reserved for guests who never truly saw me. Let them drink from the chipped one next time, if they dared show their faces. I called Linda McGrath, my lawyer of almost 20 years. She'd handled George's estate, the deed revisions, even the battle over zoning when they tried to build that ugly condo block behind my garden. Linda wasn't warm, but she was thorough. That was better. Mornin', Maven, she answered on the second ring. You're up early. I need to meet. Today. It's urgent. What kind of urgent? The kind where my daughter and son-in-law tried to move my money behind my back, and I've got the paperwork to prove it. Linda didn't ask foolish questions. 10 o'clock, my office. Bring everything. I arrived 10 minutes early, as always. Linda's office hadn't changed in years. Still the same pale blue walls, the same ticking clock, the same faint scent of lemon polish on the wooden filing cabinets. Some things comfort, others don't. I placed the folder on her desk. She read in silence. Page after page, her brows furrowed, then rose, then settled into something sharper. When she finally looked up, her voice was cool and crisp. They've been planning this a while. The trust was structured to look legitimate. Standard revocable format, triggered by capacity concerns and contingent care needs. It's legal, Maven, but it's rotten. Can we undo it? We can tear it down and start over, but we'll need to file a challenge and formally revoke your consent. I'll draft the documents today. You'll need to sign in front of a notary. Good. Linda leaned back. And what do you want to do with your assets once we clean this up? That question sat in the air a little too long, because I didn't know, not fully. I hadn't gotten that far yet. But I did know one thing. They don't get them, I said. Not 1 cent. Linda nodded. I want the house in my name alone. Any shared deed? Remove it. I want new powers of attorney drawn, durable, medical, financial, all to be reissued. And I want to decide who gets them. Understood. Anyone in mind? My granddaughter, the younger one, Lila. Linda arched a brow. She's only 21, isn't she? Yes, I said. But she's the only one who asks how I'm doing without it ending in a favor. She'll need guidance. Then I'll give it. We went over details for another half hour. Linda's voice softened once when she asked if I was sure about everything. I was. That part wasn't in question anymore. When I left, I felt no victory, just clarity. The air outside was sharper than usual, heavy with coming rain. I pulled my scarf tighter and walked the 2 blocks to the florist. Bought myself a small bundle of tulips. George used to bring them on Thursdays, no reason at all. I figured I could pick up the tradition where he left off. Back home, I placed the flowers in a narrow vase on the kitchen windowsill. They looked almost out of place there. Too bright, too alive. Like hope blooming where grief had taken root. I was pouring tea when the phone rang. Caller ID. Sadie. I let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, another call. This time from Thomas. Ignored. The third time, I answered. Mom? Sadie's voice chirped, artificially light. Hey, I've been trying to get a hold of you. Everything okay? It is now. A pause. I was just checking in, she continued. Thomas said you might have misunderstood something at the bank. It's all routine, really. Nothing to worry about. You mean the attempt to liquidate my account and reassign my assets? Her voice tightened. Mom, it's not like that. Save it. I sat down at the kitchen table. I've revoked the trust. Frozen all pending transfers. Tomorrow, I sign paperwork that removes you both from any legal authority over my finances, property, or care. That includes powers of attorney. And just so we're clear, the house is mine. Entirely. You'll receive a formal notice of that change by the end of the week. The silence on her end was long. I imagined Thomas gesturing wildly in the background. You're overreacting, Sadie said finally. We were just trying to prepare for the future. You mean the part where I die? Or the part where you assumed I wouldn't notice? Sadie tried again. You don't understand how complicated things are. Taxes, probate, liabilities. I understand plenty, I said. I built a life without shortcuts. I buried a husband, raised a daughter, and paid for your education with rolled coins from the laundry drawer. Don't you dare insult my intelligence with excuses. I don't know what Lila told you, but she's too young to... She didn't tell me anything, I cut in. This isn't about Lila. It's about you. She exhaled sharply. So what? You're just cutting us off? I'm giving you space, I said. The kind of space you seemed to want when you assumed I'd be out of the picture soon. Then I ended the call and sat very still. Not proud, not angry, just clean, inside. Like something tangled had finally been combed smooth. The letter came 2 days later. thick cream envelope. Thomas's firm's logo in the top left corner, sharp and overconfident, like everything about him. I didn't open it right away. I left it sitting on the sideboard for hours like a guest I didn't want to acknowledge. When I finally did, it was exactly what I expected. A formal clarification of the trust arrangement, dressed up in legal niceties and underhanded reassurances. According to Thomas, the trust had been executed in full alignment with the family's best interests, and the transfer attempts were part of a long-term financial strategy designed to streamline inheritance processes and minimize probate delays. No apology. No admission. Just a smug little note at the end. We remain confident that, with mutual understanding, we can realign our goals and preserve family harmony. I folded the letter neatly and placed it back in the envelope. Then I lit the stove, turned the letter over the flame, and dropped it into the sink. Some things don't deserve to be saved. That afternoon, I got a call from Linda's office. The dissolution papers were ready, along with the new property deed, medical directive, and the full revocation of powers of attorney. I went in the next morning, signed every page in ink as steady as my spine, and watched the notary's stamp mark the end of Sadie and Thomas's control over my life. "Want a copy sent to their firm?" Linda asked, not looking up. "Mail it," I said. "No email. Let them feel the weight of it in their hands." When I returned home, I walked through each room of my house like I was seeing it new. For so long, I'd moved through these spaces as a caretaker, not just of the house, but of peace, of silence, of everyone else's comfort. Not anymore. I opened the guest room closet, the one where Sadie stored her overflow, as she called it. Old handbags, boxes of promotional materials from some wellness brand she used to shill on Instagram, a stack of dusty Pilates DVDs she never once touched. I packed every item into cardboard boxes, stacked them by the front door, and called a courier. "Where to?" the kid asked, scanning the pile. I gave him their address. "Don't ring the bell," I added. "Just leave it on the porch." He nodded and wheeled the stack outside. It felt petty. It also felt right. That evening, I made myself a real dinner. Chicken with rosemary, roasted carrots, and the good olive oil I usually reserved for when company came. I set the table for one, poured a glass of red wine, and played George's favorite Coltrane album on the little record player by the window. I ate slow. I chewed. I tasted every bite. And when I cleared the dishes, I didn't think once about whether Sadie liked dark meat or if Thomas would have complained about the carrots being too soft. It was a meal without accommodation. It was mine. Later that night, I pulled out the cedar chest at the foot of my bed, the one George built when Lila was born. Inside, among the baby blankets and old photo albums, was a manila envelope labeled "Backup Copy, Living Will." I added the new versions to it, tucked in the documents from Linda's office, including the notarized deed showing the house now belonged to me and only me. Then I wrote Lila's name on the envelope, in pencil, not ink. She hadn't asked for anything. That mattered. The next day, she showed up unannounced. I was watering the ferns on the back porch when I saw her car pull up. She always parked to the side, never in the main driveway, as if afraid of being in the way. She climbed out in jeans and a sweatshirt, her curls pinned up messily. No makeup. Just herself. Thank God. "Hey, Grandma," she said, climbing the porch steps. I hope it's okay I came by?" I nodded. "Of course it is." She sat in the wicker chair beside mine. Her fingers tugged at a loose thread on her sleeve. "I heard there's been some drama." That what they're calling it? I said. She winced. They're upset. Mom's been pacing the kitchen like a lion in a cage. Thomas keeps saying things like overreach and emotional volatility. He used the word delusional at one point. I raised an eyebrow. Lila hesitated. I told him to shut up. That earned her a smile from me. You don't have to pick sides, I said. I'm not, she replied. I'm just watching. We sat in silence for a while. The afternoon sun slanted through the trees, throwing long shadows across the porch. They always treated you like a placeholder, she said eventually, like someone holding space until they could cash it in. I didn't answer. She looked at me. Are you okay? I am now. Do you need help with anything? Not right now. Can I just sit here a while? You can stay as long as you like. So we did. No drama, no negotiations, just a grandmother and a granddaughter. 2 women, 2 chairs, a porch, and finally, no one else to answer to. They didn't show up in person until the end of the week. I knew they would. Pride might have delayed them, but entitlement always finds its legs eventually. The knock came around 4:30 in the afternoon, 3 sharp raps. Thomas's rhythm, brisk, self-important, the sound of someone who thinks the door already belongs to him. I didn't rush. I wiped my hands on a towel, turned off the stove, and walked to the front hall at my own pace. When I opened the door, they both stood there. Sadie in her pressed blouse, lips tight, and Thomas with his lawyer's smile. Too many teeth, not enough warmth. Maven, he said, voice all honeyed patience. Can we come in? No. Sadie blinked. Mom? You can say what you need to say from the porch. Thomas stepped forward slightly, but I didn't move. He hesitated, then took a step back. Sadie folded her arms. Why are you doing this? Doing what, dear? This. The freezing of accounts, the property reassignment, the lawyer, all of it. I'm exercising my rights, I said calmly. Something you seemed awfully comfortable taking from me. Thomas jumped in. No one took anything. The trust was legally structured. Your signature is on every page. And do you really think that makes it decent? I asked. Is that all decency is to you now? A signature? He exhaled sharply. We were trying to make things easier. For you. For all of us. By transferring my savings to your private holding account? He didn't answer that. Sadie tried again. You weren't supposed to find out like that. Thomas was going to explain. When? After the wire transfer? After the obituary? Her face hardened. That's not fair. Isn't it? She looked away. I stepped forward, not threatening, just enough to make them both shift their weight. I want you to understand something, I said. What you did wasn't just deceitful. It was cruel. You didn't just take my trust and twist it into paperwork. You took years of silence, of small forgivenesses, and used them as a ladder. You climbed over me with your clean hands and clever words, thinking I wouldn't feel the weight. Sadie opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. No more talking today. This porch is all you get. This house, my house, is mine again. And you don't step inside it until I say so. Thomas's nostrils flared. Maven, let's be rational. I was rational for too long. Now I'm being honest. He took a breath like he might argue, then thought better of it. We'll see what happens next, he muttered, already turning away. You will, I said. Sadie lingered half a second longer. Her eyes searched mine, but not for regret, just leverage. When she found none, she turned and followed her husband. I didn't close the door until they were back in their car. That night, I slept soundly. No pills, no waking at 3 a.m. to stare at the ceiling and wonder what parts of me I'd given away without realizing. I dreamed of nothing. It was beautiful. The next morning, I called Linda and asked her to begin drafting the second phase, a formal restriction against financial contact from either Thomas or Sadie, and the transfer of a portion of my assets into an irrevocable trust in Lila's name. Not all, just enough to set a new course. The rest I'd live on, fully, freely. Then I called the security company. By sunset, there was a new keypad lock on my front door, an updated camera at the porch, and a motion-activated light by the back gate. Not because I was scared, because I was finished. Later that week, Lila came by again. This time she brought her laptop and 2 takeout containers from the Thai place she knew I liked but rarely ordered from. Because Grandma always cooks. We ate on the porch. The light was soft, and the jasmine I'd planted years ago had started to climb again up the railing. Everything smelled like memory, but didn't ache. She opened her laptop mid-meal. "I hope it's okay," she said. "I wanted to show you something." She pulled up a spreadsheet. Columns, tabs, color-coded cells. "I'm starting a small business. It's early, nothing fancy. Online resale, mostly vintage clothing and accessories. But I want to do it right. I'm applying for a grant through the state's Young Entrepreneur Program." She glanced at me. "I didn't come to ask for money, Grandma. I promise. I just wanted to share it with someone who'd be proud." I reached across the table and put my hand on hers. "You have no idea how proud." She smiled, bit her lip, looked down. "You remind me of myself," I said. "Stubborn? Focused." She laughed. "That's the nice word for it." When she left that night, she hugged me longer than usual, didn't rush, didn't check her phone. After she drove off, I stood alone on the porch, barefoot on the wooden slats, and let the air settle around me. It was warm, alive, and entirely mine. I didn't hear from them for 2 weeks. No calls, no emails, no unexpected knocks. Just quiet. The kind that feels like a lull before a storm. But I wasn't worried. I'd been through worse storms than Sadie and Thomas could ever throw at me. I used the time. Started with the attic. For years, it had been nothing more than a graveyard of forgotten boxes, George's fishing gear, Sadie's prom dress, a broken lamp I always meant to fix. I cleared it out. Every corner. Not because I needed the space, but because I needed to know there was nothing above me weighing down the beams. I moved next to the garden. The old hydrangeas were struggling, roots too crowded, petals brown-edged and brittle. I trimmed them back hard, pulled weeds, turned the soil with gloved hands. I'd neglected it. Not because I stopped caring, but because I'd been too busy caring about everything else. It felt good. All of it. When the letter came, I almost laughed. Another cream envelope. This one from a different firm. I opened it on the porch with my shears still in hand, the scent of damp earth on my sleeves. "Mrs. Maven Griffin," it read. "This is a formal notification that Thomas Whitmore and Sadie Griffin Whitmore have filed a petition of concern regarding your recent revocation of the family trust and associated powers of attorney." The wording was dense, legalese wrapped in civility. But the heart of it was this. They were challenging my capacity, claiming I'd been unduly influenced and that my decisions were potentially compromised by recent emotional distress or cognitive decline. In short, they were calling me senile. I didn't tear it up this time. I put it back in the envelope and slid it into my drawer. under the same folder that now bore Lila's name. Then I poured myself a glass of water, went outside, and finished pruning the hydrangeas. Later that day, I called Linda. "They filed?" she asked, unsurprised. "Yep," she sighed. "They'll try to push it as a guardianship claim. It won't go far. Your evaluations are current, your directives are solid, and your documentation is airtight. But it's going to be loud. I can handle loud. We may have to go to mediation. I'll wear pearls." Linda chuckled softly. "You're not rattled." "I was," I said. "Once, but not anymore." And it was true. Because when you've already survived the worst kind of betrayal, not from enemies, but from blood, there's not much left that can break you. You stop being afraid of what's coming. You start looking it in the eye. That weekend, Lila came over with her backpack slung over one shoulder and a bag of groceries in the other. "Got your favorites," she said, setting them on the counter. "Even splurged on the nice peaches." She didn't ask about the letter, but I could tell she knew. Her eyes watched me carefully, like she was waiting for the crack. There wasn't one. We baked a pie, real, from-scratch crust, no shortcuts, and listened to old records. She told me about her business plan, how she wanted to find a workspace downtown but rent was murder, how she might apply for a second grant. I let her talk, not to distract me, to ground me. Halfway through, she looked up. "If you want me to speak on your behalf at the mediation or whatever, I will." I put down my knife. "You don't owe me that." "I know." She folded a peach slice into her mouth, chewed slowly, then said, "But you've given me something. Something Mom never really understood. You taught me what it looks like when a woman refuses to be erased." That hit something in me. Not pain, something deeper. Pride. When she left that evening, she didn't hug me goodbye. She just pressed her forehead to mine, the way she used to when she was small and didn't have the words for things yet. I stood on the porch after she was gone, watching the sun melt into the trees, thinking about everything they'd tried to take from me, and everything they couldn't reach. That night, I pulled out the formal notice and wrote in neat pen across the envelope, "Received. Answer forthcoming." And then I slept. Like the woman they should have known better than to underestimate. The day of the mediation was bright and cloudless. One of those crisp, unforgiving mornings when the sun shows everything. Cracks in pavement, lint on your collar, the exact age of your eyes when you glance at your reflection. I wore my gray wool suit, the one from George's memorial. Sturdy, quiet, respectable. I added a brooch Lila gave me last Christmas, just enough defiance pinned to the collar. Linda met me outside the mediation office. She was dressed in navy with a briefcase that looked heavier than usual. "They brought another lawyer," she said as we walked in. "Not Thomas, a separate representative. Probably to make it all look more impartial." I nodded. "Let them try." The conference room had glass walls and ugly lighting. A long table sat in the center like a battlefield dressed in beige. At the far end were Sadie and Thomas, her in a pastel sweater set like a repentant PTA mom, him in a tailored blazer, fingers clasped like a politician waiting for applause. They didn't stand when I walked in. I didn't care. The mediator introduced herself. A woman named Carla, sharp-eyed, mid-50s, the kind of presence that made men with clipboards sweat. She outlined the process. Each side would present concerns, responses would be heard, and solutions would be explored. Solutions, as if this was a scheduling conflict and not an attempted financial coup. Thomas's lawyer spoke first. Young, cautious. He laid out the concern that my recent decisions were abrupt deviations from long-standing plans, that there was reason to believe undue influence may have played a role, that my health and mental capacity warranted further evaluation to ensure informed consent. It was polite, hollow, designed to sound like concern when it reeked of control. When he finished, Carla turned to me. "Mrs. Griffin, would you like to respond?" I didn't look at Thomas. I didn't look at Sadie. I looked straight at the mediator. "My name is Maven Griffin. I'm 72 years old. I built a life from nothing with a man who loved me and a daughter I once believed couldn't betray me." Sadie shifted in her seat. "I've paid my taxes, buried my husband, raised a child, helped raise a grandchild. I've signed my own checks since the Nixon years, and until recently, I never thought I'd have to defend my right to say no." Carla nodded slightly. "Go on." "I didn't deviate from the plan," I said. "They did. I signed that trust because I was lied to, not because I lacked capacity. I revoked it because I woke up. And I will not, I repeat, will not, be dragged into a courtroom to explain why I'm not ready to die yet." Thomas opened his mouth. Carla raised a hand. "I'd like to see documentation," she said to Linda. Linda slid a thick folder across the table. All medical evaluations, financial records, proof of coherent decision-making, including a notarized statement from Mrs. Griffin's primary physician confirming full cognitive health. She also passed a secondary assessment last month, administered voluntarily. Carla flipped through the file, page by page. Then she looked up at Thomas's lawyer. "Unless you have a certified counter-assessment, this challenge won't proceed." The young man squirmed. "We don't at this time." Carla closed the file. "Then I'm recommending the petition be withdrawn." Thomas looked ready to speak. Carla cut him off with a look. "Mr. Whitmore, unless you'd like to escalate this to a public hearing, where your conflict of interest would be formally exposed, I suggest you accept the outcome." Thomas clenched his jaw. Sadie didn't look at me, didn't look at anyone, just stared at her lap like it had answers. When it was done, I walked out first. Linda followed. At the elevator, she said, "You did well." I exhaled slowly. "I didn't break." "No, you didn't." We reached the lobby when I heard someone behind me. "Mom." "Sadie." I turned. She stood there, arms stiff at her sides, eyes uncertain. "You really think I meant to hurt you?" I stared at her, my daughter, my only child, and for the first time in years, I saw her clearly. Not the girl I raised, not the woman I once protected, but the person who chose comfort over character, silence over decency. "I think," I said slowly, "you wanted me quiet, small, willing, and when I stopped being those things, you decided I must be broken." Sadie blinked. "It wasn't supposed to get this bad." "No," I said. "It wasn't." She didn't apologize. She didn't cry. She just stood there, blinking like someone who lost a game they didn't know they were playing. I walked away. In the parking lot, I took the keys out of my bag and sat in the driver's seat of my old station wagon. The engine took a few turns before starting. The radio crackled on. Some gospel station, unplanned but fitting. And as I pulled out into the street, I didn't feel heavy. I felt like a woman who had just lifted the weight of her own name back onto her shoulders and realized it still fit. The weeks that followed felt strangely quiet. No lawyers, no threats, no doorbell interruptions. It was like the whole world had taken a breath and decided not to exhale. Even the birds in the backyard seemed less frantic. I found myself listening to them again, really listening, like I used to before everything got tangled in signatures and silence. I cleaned the pantry, not because it needed it, but because there was something oddly satisfying about wiping shelves that hadn't been touched in years, reading labels, tossing out expired cans of peaches I'd probably bought when George was still alive. I found 3 unopened jars of his favorite pickled okra. I didn't cry. I just set them gently back where they belonged, second shelf from the bottom, left side. The house was mine again. But that didn't mean the war was over. Sadie hadn't reached out again, not directly. But I could feel her in the corners. Lila mentioned, gently, that her mother had started asking questions. What I was doing with all that money. Whether I was mentally okay. If Lila thought I was being manipulated by resentment. She doesn't even see it, Grandma, Lila said. She thinks she's still the good guy in this. I shook my head. No, baby. She doesn't think she's good. She just doesn't think I'm allowed to be angry. One morning, I found an envelope slid through my mail slot. No postage, no return address. Inside, a handwritten note from Thomas. Maven, please consider sitting down with us. No lawyers, no tension, just a conversation. We miss you. This doesn't have to be a permanent break. No mention of what they'd done. No apology. I tore the note in half, then into quarters. I didn't burn it this time. I put the pieces in the trash where they belonged, buried under the eggshells and coffee grounds. Let them rot. But it wasn't just about rejecting them anymore. It was time to build something new. That afternoon, I took Lila out to the old neighborhood cafe. The one with the mosaic tile floor and terrible coffee that somehow always made me feel 12 years younger. We sat by the window. I've been thinking, I said, stirring my tea even though I take it plain, about what comes next. Lila looked up, cautious but open. You're young, smart, and more importantly, you have values that don't shift with convenience. She raised an eyebrow. Are you about to ask me to run for mayor? Close, I smiled. I want to set up a trust. A real one. For you. Not for spending now, not for college or handbags or anything flashy. For later. For when it matters. Grandma, I'm not dying, not planning to. But I am living, and I want to live with intention. She sat quietly, her fingers wrapped around her mug. I know this puts pressure on you, I said. And I won't tie your hands. But if I go tomorrow, I want someone with spine and decency holding the line. Someone who remembers who I really was. Lila blinked a few times, then nodded. Okay, but only if I can earn it. You already have. We didn't hug right there. We're not that kind of family. But we looked at each other, really looked. And in that moment, something settled. Not inheritance. Legacy. After lunch, we stopped by Linda's office. I had the documents already drawn. All Lila had to do was sign the acknowledgement. She did so with a pen that didn't tremble. That evening, I stood in the doorway of my study and stared at the shelves of photo albums. Years of birthdays and Thanksgivings and graduations, all frozen behind glossy pages. I didn't open them. I didn't need to. I knew what they contained. Joy and absence, love and erasure. A record of what I'd given and what was never truly returned. I pulled down one empty album. On the cover, I wrote in neat letters, "The Life After." It would start with this year, with the hydrangeas coming back, with the scent of jasmine returning to the porch, with a girl who reminded me who I was before I forgot. I started going for walks again, not far, just a few blocks in the early morning before the heat settled in and the street got noisy with lawn crews and delivery trucks. My legs weren't what they used to be, but they remembered. Muscle has memory, and so does pride. The neighbors began to notice. Mrs. Elkins from across the street waved from her porch one morning and called out, "Good to see you out again, Maven." I smiled back. Good to be seen. The truth is, I hadn't realized how invisible I'd become, not just to my family, but to the world around me. You get quieter as you get older, and then people stop looking altogether. They assume you're fading, irrelevant, already halfway gone. But I wasn't. I was still here, and I intended to make that fact uncomfortable for anyone who'd tried to write me off. One afternoon, while I was watering the new begonias by the walkway, a car I didn't recognize pulled into the drive. Black, too shiny, windows too dark. The door opened, and out stepped a woman I hadn't seen in nearly 10 years. Claire, my sister's daughter, Sadie's cousin. She looked older, of course. We all did. But her expression hadn't changed. That soft, wary alertness, like she was always bracing for someone to ask too much. "Maven," she said, almost hesitant. "I hope this isn't a bad time." "It's fine," I said, setting down the hose. "You're a long way from Raleigh." "I know, I heard what happened." I didn't ask how. Bad news travels faster than family. "I just wanted to see you," she said. "In person." We went inside. I offered her water, then tea. She took the tea. Sat on the edge of the same couch where Sadie had once told me I was too sentimental for my own good. Claire glanced around. "The place looks the same. I like the same." She nodded, then folded her hands in her lap. "I don't know what I can say, except I'm sorry." "For what?" "For what Sadie did? For what Thomas tried to do? For not being around more." She looked down. "My mom always said you were the spine of this family. I guess we forgot that." I didn't respond right away. Apologies are strange things. Sometimes they heal. Sometimes they're just mirrors people hold up so they can feel better about the reflection. But Claire meant it. That much I could tell. "I'm still standing," I said. "That's why I came," she replied. "I thought maybe you'd let me come by more often. Help you around the place. Just be here. If that's not too much." It wasn't, and I said so. Later that evening, after she left, I sat on the porch and watched the street darken. Children's bikes lay toppled on driveways. A neighbor's wind chime stirred even without wind. The jasmine bloomed thicker now, the scent folding into the dusk like something sacred. I thought of Claire, of how many women in this family had been taught to shrink, to smooth things over, to smile when they should have stood up. And I thought, maybe that ends now. Maybe I wasn't just fixing what Sadie broke. Maybe I was building something stronger. That night, Lila texted me, "Grandma, can I bring a friend over tomorrow? Someone I want you to meet." I typed back, "Of course. I'm making lemon cake. Hope she likes sugar." The reply came with a smiley face and a heart. I didn't usually care for emojis, but I kept that one, pinned it in my mind like a photograph of something that hadn't happened yet, but was already beautiful. She arrived just before noon. Lila, with her curls loose this time, sundress swinging, a Tupperware of strawberries in one hand and a bottle of sparkling water in the other. And next to her, a girl with short cropped hair, dark skin, wide eyes that looked like they'd seen more than most girls their age and still kept looking. "This is Quinn," Lila said, stepping aside so the girl could walk through the doorway. Quinn, this is my grandmother. The girl smiled and extended her hand. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Griffin. Maven, I corrected gently, shaking her hand. Only people trying to sell me insurance call me Mrs. Griffin. They both laughed, and something relaxed in the air. We sat in the kitchen. I poured lemonade, sliced the cake. Lila talked the way she always did, bright, fast, alive. But Quinn was quieter, not shy, just careful. She watched the room, watched me, and I recognized it, that look, the way a girl learns to measure her surroundings, even while smiling. At one point, while Lila stepped out to take a call from her supplier, Quinn leaned forward a little. She talks about you all the time, you know, she said. I looked up. Oh? Yeah. Not just the good stuff. The hard stuff, too. What happened with your daughter? The house? The trust? I nodded. Lila doesn't sugarcoat things. No, Quinn agreed. She doesn't. Then, after a pause, she said you're the reason she believes women don't have to stay quiet. That settled deep in my chest. Not pride, not flattery, just a stillness, a recognition, like hearing your name spoken in a room you thought you'd been forgotten in. Most of my life, I said, I thought quiet was safe. That if I kept my head down, gave what I had, didn't ask too many questions, people would treat me with care. Quinn's eyes stayed on mine. They didn't, I continued. They took, and they told me I was lucky to be giving. Quinn nodded slowly, like she knew exactly what that meant. Lila's choosing different, I said. And if you're her friend, I expect you are too. Quinn smiled, soft but sure. I'm trying. When Lila came back, we ate more cake, laughed too loud, and talked about nothing important. Shoes and summer heat, and the new bookstore opening downtown. It was ordinary. God, it felt good to be ordinary again. After they left, I stood for a long time in the kitchen doorway, holding my empty glass, thinking how strange it was that peace didn't always arrive in grand gestures. Sometimes it came in the form of two young women sitting at your table, finishing every bite of lemon cake and not asking for a single thing except your time. That night, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole. Thomas. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I turned on the porch light and waited until he stepped back, startled by the sudden brightness. When I opened the door, I didn't say hello. He cleared his throat. I came alone. Congratulations. I know I shouldn't be here, but I wanted to tell you something before Sadie makes it worse. She's still trying? He looked tired. The Polish was fading, his collar slightly rumpled, one corner of his dress shirt untucked. She wants to sue for emotional distress, claims you're trying to turn the family against her, that Lila's being used. I didn't react. He rubbed his jaw. I tried to talk her out of it. You didn't try hard enough before. He looked at me then, not smug, not performative, just a man who realized too late that he'd bet wrong. I underestimated you, he said. No, I corrected. You counted on me being too tired to fight. He didn't deny it. She won't win, I added. Not in court, not in life. Because no judge in this state, or any other, is going to believe a grown woman with two houses and a personal stylist was emotionally distressed by her mother refusing to be robbed. Thomas let out a breath, half laugh, half defeat. I just wanted you to know I'm done with it. Are you? He nodded. I moved out last week. That I hadn't expected. She's not who I thought she was, he said. She is, I replied. You just finally saw it. He looked at me a moment longer, then turned and walked down the steps without another word. I watched until he reached his car. He didn't look back. When the engine faded, I closed the door and leaned against it. Not because I was shaken, because endings, even when necessary, still land hard. But this ending wasn't mine. It was just another fracture in a house that had been cracked long before it collapsed. Mine was already built anew, and this time, I knew where every beam belonged. It rained the next morning, not the loud kind that batters windows and makes you feel like the roof's about to lift off. No, the slow, steady kind. The kind that starts before dawn and soaks the earth without asking permission. I opened the front window just a crack, let the air in. Everything smelled like old wood, wet soil, and clean beginnings. I made oatmeal. With cinnamon. Sat at the table with the old radio playing soft blues and ate without hurry. Some mornings, I felt the years. Others, I felt like I was just now stepping into myself. By noon, the rain had stopped, and the sun broke through, that sudden Georgia brightness that makes wet leaves shine like glass. I walked the garden path barefoot, just once. The stones were slick and cool underfoot. I smiled. George would have shaken his head and told me I'd catch a cold. I never did. That afternoon, Linda called. "She's filed," she said without any preamble. "Civil suit, emotional distress, and financial interference." I didn't sigh, didn't curse. "Let her," I said. "You don't want to try to resolve it privately?" "She's not looking for resolution. She's looking for attention." "I won't be the one to give it." There was a pause. "I'll file a motion to dismiss," Linda said. "Shouldn't take long. It's paper thin. Just keep Lila out of it. She's not named. Yet. Yet." It hung there between us. After we hung up, I sat in the study for a long time, just watching the shadows shift across the floor. I thought about how much time I'd spent in this room, balancing budgets, writing holiday cards, reading mail that rarely brought good news. I thought about how little of that time had belonged to me, even in my own house. Then I stood, walked to the desk, and pulled open the drawer where I kept the old family photos. Not the albums, the loose ones. The ones I never framed because they didn't fit any narrative I liked. One of Sadie at 10, beaming, missing both front teeth, arms around a mutt we took in for one summer before he ran off. One of George with his face turned, caught mid-laugh, flour on his cheek from helping me bake a pie he never stopped bragging about. One of me, sitting on this same porch in a sweater 2 sizes too big. Lila asleep in my lap, her tiny hand curled in the fabric like a question mark. I put them in a new envelope, wrote on the front, "What I choose to keep." Then I walked through the house, room by room, not to clean, not to sort, just to see, to notice. The chipped baseboard in the hallway where Sadie used to run her dolls. The faded rug by the kitchen that still bore a stain from a spilled glass of wine at our 25th anniversary dinner. The back door that stuck in the summer because the frame had swollen with time and humidity, just like everything else in this life. I loved it all, not because it was perfect, because it was mine. That night I called Lila. "Tell me," I said, "how's your business?" She lit up instantly. "It's growing, slowly but good. I reinvested last month's profit, bought a few ad slots online, got 2 new clients this week. Small orders, but they're talking." "You need space?" I asked. There was a pause. "What do you mean?" "A room, an office, a place where you can grow." She hesitated. I didn't want to ask. "You didn't." I offered. She breathed out. "Then yes. God, yes, if you're sure." I'm sure. We agreed on the guest room. By the weekend, she'd moved in a desk, a set of storage shelves, and a whiteboard with handwritten goals in pink and green marker. It didn't match the curtains. I didn't care. That room had always been a space for someone who needed shelter. It still was. But now, it wasn't a refuge from storm. It was a launch pad. The next morning, Lila made breakfast. French toast, no syrup, just berries and a dusting of sugar. She cooked barefoot, hair in a knot, humming some pop song I didn't know the words to. I watched from the doorway, arms crossed, chest warm. "How's it feel?" I asked. She turned, spatula in hand. "What? To own your time?" She thought for a second. "Like breathing with both lungs." That's how I felt too, for the first time in years. The motion to dismiss was granted in less than a week. Linda called me on a Tuesday. Voice light, for the first time in months. Judge threw it out without a hearing, called it speculative, unsupported, and, quote, an inappropriate use of court resources to settle personal resentments. I smiled. Did he really say that? Swore it right into the record. I poured myself a small glass of wine that evening, not to celebrate, just to acknowledge the moment. Not every battle deserves a parade. Some just need a pause, a breath, a nod to yourself in the mirror when no one's watching. But of course, Sadie didn't stop. She never did. This time, it wasn't courts or lawyers or claims. It was quieter, subtler. She went to people, neighbors, old friends, church acquaintances I hadn't seen in years. She started telling stories, that I was acting erratic, that I'd been isolated, that Lila was taking advantage. She painted herself as the wounded daughter, the victim of miscommunication and sudden cruelty. A few calls came in, mostly polite, curious, not confrontational. "Hey, Maven, just checking in. How are you holding up? I heard some things, thought I'd reach out." I told them all the same thing. I'm fine. But I knew what Sadie was doing. It was a kind of theft more insidious than money. The slow, public erosion of reputation. Women like her don't fight you head on once they've lost in court. They do it sideways. Whisper by whisper. Smile by smile. It didn't shake me. But it did make me tired. One morning, I went to the market for eggs and found myself hesitating at the dairy fridge. Not because I couldn't remember what I needed, but because I suddenly realized I didn't want to be seen. Not by familiar faces. Not by people who might be watching for signs of the erratic behavior they'd been told to expect. I bought the eggs anyway, went home, baked a pie. But something had been scratched, and I didn't like how it itched. Lila noticed. That evening, while we were washing dishes, she said, "You want me to say something? Post something? Set the record straight?" "No," I said. "That's exactly what she wants. A spectacle. I won't give her one." She dried a plate, nodded. "But I will tell you this," I added. "Silence is not surrender." "But sometimes it is a strategy." Lila looked at me. "You planning something?" "I'm deciding," I said, and I was. The next morning, I got up early and drove to the cemetery. I hadn't been in a while. George's headstone sat in its usual patch of shade under the sycamore tree, the name carved clean and simple. No quote, no scripture. Just a date, a name, and a dash between them. The little line that held everything. I stood there for a while. Didn't say anything. Then finally, "I didn't let them take it, George. Any of it." The wind shifted. The sycamore whispered. "I kept what mattered." I went home lighter. 2 days later, I mailed a letter. Not to Sadie. To her son, my grandson, Owen. We hadn't spoken in nearly a year. He was in his late 20s now, quiet, distant, wrapped up in some tech job out west. He hadn't taken sides, but he hadn't called either. In the letter, I told him the truth. Not the whole history, just the facts. What was taken, what I reclaimed, what I'd built since. I ended it with, I don't expect loyalty. I only ask for clarity. And if one day you want to know who I really was, I hope you'll ask me, not the people who rewrote me. I didn't wait for a reply, didn't need one. The act of sending it was enough. That evening, Lila and I had dinner on the porch. Roasted vegetables, cornbread, sweet tea. Nothing fancy, everything right. Halfway through, she said, "You ever think about leaving this place? Starting fresh somewhere else?" "No," I said. "I'm not the one who needs to leave." She smiled. "Fair. Then, I'm thinking of expanding the business. Out of the guest room? Out of the house, maybe rent a space, maybe hire someone part-time." "Then do it," I said. "Use the trust. I'd only use what's needed." "I know you would." She paused. "Feels strange, doesn't it?" "What?" "How much peace costs." I nodded. "Worth every cent." She leaned back in her chair, legs tucked under her, eyes closed to the night. And for a moment we sat without time. Just two women, one who had reclaimed her name and one who was building hers, one step at a time. I got a letter from Owen, typed, short, careful. He thanked me for writing, said he didn't know the details, that Sadie never told him much, only hinted that things had gone cold between us, that I was choosing to live in the past. But my letter had clarified a lot. That was how he put it. Clarified. At the end, he wrote, "I don't know what role I'm meant to play in all of this, but I'd like to come visit, if that's something you'd be open to." I folded the letter gently, set it beside the envelope, and stared at the handwriting on the front. Not his, someone else's. A receptionist, probably. The kind of small distance men like him still leave between themselves and anything emotional. But he'd signed the bottom in ink. That mattered. I wrote back the next day. "Come whenever you like. The door is open. You won't need to knock." He arrived the following Saturday. Same car as always. Too new, too quiet. He stepped out, wearing a windbreaker and holding a tin of tea, like he wasn't sure if this was a peace offering or a polite gesture. Maybe it was both. "Grandma," he said. I stepped onto the porch. "Owen." We hugged, stiff at first, then not. Inside, he looked around the living room like it was smaller than he remembered. Or maybe he was just bigger now, older, more filled in. "I like what you've done with it," he said. "I haven't changed a thing." He smiled. "That tracks." We sat. I poured tea. He didn't touch the cookies I'd laid out. Too nervous, probably, or too polite. Some things don't change, even with age. For a while, we talked about nothing, his work, weather in Portland, flights, delays. Then finally, "She's been different." "Your mother?" He nodded. "Since all this happened, angrier. I mean, she was always tight, controlled. But now there's a bitterness." "She lost something," I said. Owen looked up. "What?" "The version of me she thought she could control forever." He didn't argue. "I tried to stay out of it," he said. "But not knowing, not really knowing, it started to weigh on me." I leaned back in the chair. "You're allowed to love her and still see what she did." He looked relieved when I said that. Then he said something that caught me off guard. "She used to say you gave everything to Lila." "She said that?" "Yeah." Not just money. Time. Praise. Patience. She used to say you only ever saw yourself in Lila, not in her. I sat with that a long moment. She was right, I said finally. Owen's brow furrowed. I do see myself in Lila. Not because I love her more, but because she never asked me to disappear. Sadie wanted love that didn't ask questions. Lila offered love that listened. Owen was quiet. Then, she'll never see it that way. I know. I think that's why she resents you so much now, he said. You stopped playing along. I nodded. That's the real betrayal, isn't it? When a woman decides she won't shrink anymore. He left a few hours later, didn't make promises, didn't vow to return soon. But I watched the way he hugged me, longer than before. Real. No distance left in it. That night, I stood in the guest room. Lila had cleared out most of her things, moved her business into a rented space downtown. The room felt lighter. Ready. I took out the folder with my will, added a new page, a letter, to be read later. I wrote about what had happened, not the drama, the truth, the decisions I made, why I made them, what I hoped would remain. And then I wrote this. If you are reading this, know that I loved you enough to unlearn silence. I loved you enough to reclaim my name, my house, my voice. And I did it not just for me, but for every woman who comes after me. So they'd never think they have to wait until 72 to remember who they are. I signed it, folded it, placed it at the top of the file. Then I turned out the light and walked down the hall like a woman who knew the ground beneath her feet was finally, fully hers. The call came just after sunrise. Lila's voice, thin and trembling, as if the words were trying to outrun her breath. It's Mom, she said. She's in the hospital. I sat up in bed. What happened? Overdose. Pills. Not fatal. They pumped her stomach. But it wasn't. It wasn't an accident. The room felt suddenly too still. The kind of silence that presses in around you, like a held breath. She asked for you, Lila added, almost like a question. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't feel something, but because what I felt was complicated. Dense, like holding a stone in your chest that used to be a heart. I arrived an hour later. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and sadness. It always did. I knew these halls. I'd walked them years ago when George got sick. Back then, I'd carried soup and soft words and quiet prayers. Now, I carried nothing. Sadie was pale when I entered, eyes sunken, skin too tight across her face. She looked small, not just physically. Small in that way people get when they run out of stories to tell about themselves. She turned her head when she saw me, didn't cry, didn't smile. Mom. Sadie. The room hummed, machines monitoring the life she'd tried, however briefly, to leave behind. I didn't think you'd come, she said after a long pause. I wasn't sure I would. She nodded, looked down at her hands, IV trailing from one wrist like an accusation. They said I'll be held for evaluation, maybe a few days, maybe more. You're lucky, I said. Some people don't get another morning. She winced. Whether from guilt or pain, I didn't know. Are you here to say I told you so? She asked. No. Then why? I looked at her, really looked. This woman who had been my daughter, my betrayer, my echo, and my grief. Because once upon a time, I said slowly, I loved you before I knew what it would cost me. And that love doesn't vanish. It just stops being the reason I abandoned myself. Tears slipped from her eyes then, silent. No sobs, no apology. Just water from a place too deep for words. I didn't know how to stop being angry, she whispered. You never tried. She looked at me. And now? I shook my head. Now I protect what's left. She closed her eyes, turned her face toward the window, where the sun was just beginning to touch the edge of the blinds. I stood for another minute, maybe two. Then I walked out. Lila was waiting in the hallway. She didn't ask what was said. She just slipped her arm through mine as we walked back to the car. Later that afternoon, I sat on the porch again. The rain had come back, soft, persistent. The kind that seeps into the wood and makes everything smell like time. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt honest. And that, for once, was enough. They thought I'd fade, that once I said enough, I'd slip into silence, grow small in my chair, wait for permission to speak again. They didn't understand. The day I stood up wasn't the end of me. It was the beginning. If you're reading this, and they've made you feel like you're too old to start again, listen to me. You are exactly the right age to stop disappearing. Don't wait to reclaim your life. Don't wait until they bury you in their expectations. Tell your story. Then live like it matters. And when you're done reading this, leave a comment. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let them know they're not alone. Now let me finish mine. It's been 7 months since the hospital. Sadie never tried to sue again. She stayed in the program. Outpatient, then therapy. Lila said she goes quiet sometimes when my name comes up, but not cruel, just distant. And I suppose that's all right. Some reconciliations live only in silence, not forgiveness exactly, but distance with dignity. Owen sends postcards now, always typed, always short, but he signs them in ink. Quinn is still around. I hear her laugh before I hear the door. She and Lila are loud, full of plans, always moving furniture or painting something or printing off spreadsheets. There's life in the house again. Not chaotic life, chosen life. That's different. And me? I got the porch fixed, hired someone to re-sand the wood, tighten the railings, replace the cracked slats. It cost more than I expected. It was worth every penny. Because when I sit here in the mornings now, coffee warm in my palms, I know that this space, this home, this body, this breath is mine. Fully mine. The will is finished, the trust is locked, the letters are sealed. But the story? It goes on. Just last week, I taught Lila how to mend a hem by hand. She said, "Grandma, when am I ever going to need this?" I said, "Someday you'll love something enough not to throw it away." She rolled her eyes, but I saw the way she folded the needle back into its case, gentle. She's learning. They all are. There's a photo of George and me on the mantel, taken before Sadie was born. I look too young to know anything about pain. I look like someone who still believed that love was enough to hold everything together. But now I know better. Love is the start. But dignity. That's what keeps the house from falling in. If you've read this far, thank you. Thank you for sitting with me, for listening, for seeing me not as someone broken or bitter, but as someone who refused to be erased. Now go. Live out loud. Say no when it matters. Say yes when it's true. And if they call you difficult, smile. And keep the damn house.